We're back looking at one of the world's largest countercultural events, Burning Man. It's a growing community that's evolved into living by 10 principles, and now they're embarking on a plan to change the shape of the 21st century. Deep in the desert, Burning Man is a temporary city that builds art to display for 1 week every summer. Absurd spirituality and an extreme sense of freedom prevail. Commerce is banned, but creativity is king. 27 artists from Russia created Cradle of Mir, 36 feet tall. It held a model of the International Space Station. The artists wanted to probe, what can humans create that eliminates borders and helps everyone? By week's end, like all art at Burning Man, Cradle of Mir was demolished in a spectacular fire. Over the 2 decades of this art party, 10 values emerged that seem to keep people coming back for more.
You probably know that this community is more or less allergic to pronouncements made by some central authority. And, but in the case of the principles, the greater community simply inhaled them. And they said, of course, and then went on to use them. And so that is it is a world movement at this point.
A world movement guided by a culture of 10 principles, understood values that form the Burning Man ethos. Let's check them out. Decommodification, no money or advertising here. Radical self-reliance. You bring in everything you need to cope with the desert conditions and no running water. Communal effort and civic responsibility, which is what happens living in camps. My team lived it all.
So the principle is that you're supposed to leave no trace. This might not look like a big deal, but it's gasoline, and we know that we don't want to leave that in God's creation, and so we want to make sure to clean it up, leave no trace.
All right, okay, let's go over to Luke. Luke, tell us about why you've got this going here.
Sure. Well, no money is actually allowed on the playa. The economy of Burning Man is based around something called gifting. And the group who spilt this oil from their RV is a group of Australians who gave us the top of their van as a gift for a location for filming. We're gifting them the removal of their oil. It's not an exchange, it's a free choice. They didn't do it in expectation of something in return. They gave it freely and we're giving it freely back to them.
How have you felt about those two combinations here, the gifting economy and that no commodification here?
I think it's quite beautiful, quite liberating actually.
Also in Burning Man's 10 principles, radical inclusion, participation, and immediacy. This seemed to come naturally to the spiritual folk here. This is Caleb Brundage using yellow flags for an artistic experience in praying. He attracted this Jewish man, a random burner with the sunglasses who was of no faith, and me, the Christian. A combination of the burner values of gifting, giving someone prayer, and inclusion. Anyone can have it.
Totally unique offering.
This is Burning Man's Temple of Holiness. Best I could tell, spiritual here is not directed at any deity. Here, burners meditate, mourn, and post memorial of loved ones lost, and some just sit and rest. I conclude it is a pagan temple full of the burner value of radical self-expression. See the funky glass man? While Christians too get radical in this temple, here's Caleb Brundage using the Old Testament concept of God's banner over people. For him, white flags express the glory of God. This art of Christian flagging is meant to symbolize the Bible verse that God's banner, or flag, over all people is love. Over the years, Burning Man is getting a reputation for becoming more spiritual, but its main founder, Larry Harvey, is an atheist.
What do I call transcendence? The sense that you belong to something that is like you but much greater than you. And the man inspires transcendence. He's like us. You know, he's instinct. You know, he looks like you, right? And you identify with him, but he's bigger. By his very presence, he unites an entire community
Do you believe there is a God?
No, I'm an atheist. I never found it. I've never believed in a supreme being, but I do believe that being is supreme. A subtle distinction, but a spiritual notion. I think being is supreme.
But in the radical inclusion, radical self-expression, and gifting economy of Burning Man, the God-fearing burners are welcome, and they're doing all kinds of interesting things here. This group of 24 Christians host Freedom Lounge and spend every day praying with burners.
We're so free, Jesus! We're so free! We're so free! We're so free!
So we see you get very intimate with people, spending quite a bit of time with each person who comes into the tent. What kind of stories, what kind of things are happening, hearing people?
Well, we have the menu board, which they kind of pick something out that draws them into the tent, but when they walk in, God begins to give us the ability to see their heart. But He also gives us words of knowledge. He gives us the ability to know things about them. And then a bridge is built, a trust bridge is built. And then we can begin to allow God to talk to them the way that they can receive His language and the way that they are. We decided that we would identify Him by His attributes and by His character. That He's forgiving, He's the peacemaker, He's the shame taker, He's the one who brings a heart together. He's the one who can do an organic spiritual alignment. He can do an original root recovery. He's the one who can do spiritual cleansing and actually bring it to pass and fill them up with His Spirit, which brings them life.
Freedom, peace.
You know, He's got it all mapped out. We don't have it mapped out. And we're learning to follow the Holy Spirit. We're learning to follow Him. We call Him the Spirit of Truth. Who doesn't want an encounter with the Spirit of Truth? And so we tell them it's by invitation. We've had our own, but this is your deal. Would you like to have an encounter with the Spirit of Truth? And so they just put their hands out and they go, Spirit of Truth, come. And when they do, He comes.
Why do we have to come out here to the desert to see people like this being prayed for? Why can't this happen at church?
My husband and I have been pastors for a long time, for about 30 years. And I can tell you that this kind of ministry just isn't often allowed in churches. There's no grid for it. There's no, everything has to be so in order and all that stuff. And out here, it's organic. It's real. It's just what you have to do. It's just whatever happens. And we're not blocked up out here.
When Context returns, trying to make sense of this, does the church have a place at Burning Man?